But that's a good idea. Here we go. Okay, welcome everybody. We now will commence with the Santa Fe County Planning Commission meeting on Thursday, March 21st, 2019 at 6 o'clock. Call to order, please. Roll call, please.
Charlie Gonzalez.
Here.
Frank Katz. J.J. Gonzalez.
Here.
Leroy Lopez.
Here.
Susan Martin.
Here.
Fred Raskin.
Here.
Steve Shepherd.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Let's please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, approval of the agenda. Vicki, any amendments to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, there are no amendments to the agenda.
Thank you. No tabled or withdrawn items?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Okay, approval of February 21st, 2019 minutes. Do I have a motion, discussion?
I move.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. The motion is approved.
Mr. Chair, did you take a vote?
Oh, no. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Let's get this thing going here. Next, consent agenda final orders. Case CUP number 18-5030, Bruno Self-Storage Conditional Use Permit. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I so move
Oh.
approval of the conditional use permit.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Still under the consent agenda. Case B, case number APP 18-5130, Bruce and Debbie McAllister appeal. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I so move to approve the denial of the appeal.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, this is also approved. Let's move to new business. Case number CUP 18-5240, Cedar Grove Auto Repair. Mr. Lovato, please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Planning Commission members. Cedar Grove Auto Repair and Performance, Sean Meek, applicant, requests approval of a conditional use permit to operate an automotive repair and performance facility as a medium impact home occupation. The facility will occupy an existing 1,275 square foot garage shop and a 392 square foot office structure adjacent to a 3,405 square foot residence located in the residential estate zoning district at 10 Meek Road off of Highway 344 within Township 11 North, Range 7 East, Section 23, SDA 2, Commission District 3. On June 15, 2017, County Code Enforcement issued a notice of violation to the applicant for operating a business without a business license in violation of county ordinances. On January 25, 2018, County Code Enforcement filed a criminal complaint in Santa Fe County Magistrate Court alleging the applicant violated the county ordinances by operating a business without a business license and maintaining litter and debris on the property. To resolve these alleged violations, the applicant removed the litter and debris from the property and filed for an application for a conditional use permit. On November 19, 2018, applicant submitted an application for a conditional use permit to operate an automotive repair and performance facility as a medium-impact home occupation according to the Sustainable Land Development Code, Section 10.6.4.3, Table 10-1, Home Occupation Requirements. The facility is authorized under a conditional use permit if it employs no more than 5 employees, uses no more than 50% of the heated square space, has no more than 1,500 square feet for accessory building or storage, has no more than 12 appointments per visits per day, does not store more than 6 pieces of heavy equipment, and complies with the traffic, access, and parking requirements in Section 10.6.5 and the signage requirements in Section 7, 9, 10. There is an existing 3,405 square foot residence, a 1,275 square foot accessory structure, and a 392 square foot accessory structure located on the 4.99 acre parcel. The business facility consists of the accessory structure, which will be utilized as the office building. The applicant proposes to operate the facility by appointment only between 9 and 4 p.m., 7 days a week. Review. County Building and Development Services reviewed the application for compliance with the following requirements of the SLDC. A, medium impact home occupation of the SLDC, Section 10.6.4.3, medium impact home occupations. B, sustainable design standards, which include access, fire protection, landscaping and buffering, fences and walls, lighting, signs, road design standards. Utilities, water, wastewater and water conservation, terrain management, flood prevention and flood control, solid waste. And C, agency review from the New Mexico Environment Department, County Fire Marshal, County Utilities, County Planning, and NMDOT. No comments or concerns from the NMED, conditional approval from the County Fire Marshal, approval from County Utilities, approval from County Planning, and approval from NMDOT. And D, conditional use permits. The SLDC, Section 4.9.6.5, approval criteria establishes the approval criteria for conditional use permits. Staff has determined that the applicant's proposed use satisfies the criteria because it will not, A, or 1, be detrimental to the health, safety, and general welfare of the area. 2, tend to create congestion in roads. 3, create a potential hazard for fire, panic, or other danger. 4, tend to overcrowd the land and cause undue concentration of population. 5, interfere with adequate provisions for schools, parks, water, sewerage, transportation, or other public requirements, conveniences, or improvements. 6, interfere with adequate light and air. 7, be inconsistent with the purpose of the property's zoning classification or any other way inconsistent with the spirit of the SLDC Land Development Code and Sustainable Growth Management Plan. Recommendation. On February 14th, 2019, this application was presented to the hearing officer for consideration. The hearing officer recommended approval of the application with the conditions recommended by staff. Staff has determined that the proposed use complies with the SLDC and recommends that the conditional use permit for a medium impact home occupation should be approved for Cedar Grove auto repair and performance, subject to the following conditions. And Mr. Chair, can I enter those conditions into the record?
Yes, you may.
Thank you very much, and I stand for any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, John. Does the commission have any questions of staff?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Shepherd?
as part of the criminal complaint, it says maintaining litter and debris. Could you sort of describe what that litter and debris was, how much of it was automotive versus household trash?
Mr. Chair, Commission Member Shepherd, it was a mix of all. It has since been brought into compliance and re-inspected several times as Mr. Meek's been following through with his proposals.
Thank you.
Any other questions of staff?
I've got a couple of questions.
JJ?
You know, you mentioned they had an EID permit. Did I read in here that they had, I'm sorry. Did I read that they had to haul water to the residents? Their well was dry?
Mr. Chair, Commission Member Gonzalez, that is correct. He does currently have a standing application where he provides water to his property from certain areas within the county.
And how long have they been without water and having to haul water?
Mr. Chair, Commission Member Gonzalez, I'm not too sure. It's not clarified in the report, but perhaps the applicant can further address that.
I will ask that question to the app. The other question I have is, I saw the following conditions, and there seems to be 23 conditions attached to this application. Has the applicant agreed to all those conditions?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Gonzalez, it was agreed upon at hearing officer. Perhaps if whatever recommendation you might make, he will.
I'm not familiar with all the conditions, but the number of conditions. I mean, it seems that I haven't seen an application like this with that many conditions. Most of the conditions I see 5 or 6 conditions, but this is 23 conditions. And I hate to have to go through each one for you to explain them to me. But I'll
Mr. Chair
just,
Gonzalez, I understand, and that is the reason why it is a conditional use permit in front of you here today.
okay. Well, thank you.
Okay, any other questions of staff? Okay, is the applicant here? You're Mr. Meek? Yes. Yes, do you want to give a presentation?
Mr. Meek, I need to swear you in. Do you swear affirming testimony you will give us the truth?
Yes.
State your name and address, please.
Sean Meek, 10 Meek Road, Edgewood, New Mexico.
Go ahead.
I have agreed with all the terms. I don't really have anything else to say.
Okay, I have a couple questions.
Okay.
That outdoor lift that's there,
Yes.
or car lift, is that going to remain outdoor, or are you going to ever enclose it?
That's going to remain outdoors.
It's going to remain outdoors?
Yes.
Okay. Also, when you're repairing an automobile, what do you anticipate being the longest time you'll keep a car there for repair? Will be parked there in your yard, or will be there?
Typically, it's 1 to 2 days. The only other time would be something that's, takes time to get, an engine or transmission, stuff like that, that has to be shipped in. Sometimes it can take up to 2 weeks, a month, just depending on the vehicle in question.
Is the property fenced?
Yes,
Is it just a regular fence, or is it a screening fence?
just a regular fence.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Any other questions?
Yes. You
Fred?
mentioned that there are 23 conditions attached to this.
Yes,
You're in accord with all of those conditions?
yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Shepherd?
what is your automotive background?
I've gone to UTI, graduated there in '06. I've worked for several dealerships, a couple independents, and now myself.
And the scope of automotive work you're going to do consists of what?
Pretty much anything automotive. I mean, electrical, AC, engine repair, stuff like that.
Body work?
No. No body work, no paint.
Fluids? You're going to have all the usual fluids, oil, antifreeze, gear oil, transmission
Yes.
fluid?
All of that is hauled off by a company called Crystal Clean. They pick it up and recycle it, I guess.
Do you currently have a contract with them?
Yes.
Is there any fluids or liquids they'll not pick up?
None that I'm aware of.
What about batteries?
Batteries I take into the scrapyard myself.
Tires?
I dispose of them at the county transfer station.
So you'll do that yourself as opposed to somebody else doing it?
Yes. Yes.
And there's no water in the shop?
Not in the shop and not in the office.
So you're a mechanic. I used to be a mechanic. You get awfully dirty as a mechanic, so how are you going to clean yourself up?
Well, I had plenty of rags for that.
And your customers that come in, do they have accessibility to a restroom while they're waiting for their car?
There's no waiting allowed. It's drop-off only.
Interesting. Go ahead if you have some.
Leroy, go ahead.
Mr. Meek, what kind of vehicles do you work on? Domestic American cars or?
Domestic, Asian, some European, all just, small vehicle.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I've got it.
Okay, JJ, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask the fire department representative to address a couple of things. Thank you for coming. I read in the application that they're required to have certain type of fire extinguishers. Is that the acceptable type of fire extinguishers for any vehicle fires or anything if they happen to have a fire in the shop or anything? Have you done the review there and everything complies with your requirements?
I did make another stop at the site yesterday, and yes, the fire extinguishers he does have in place for his shop and the office meet the requirement.
And what's the nearest fire department to Sean's business?
We have 2 stations right around the corner. I would say 3/4 of a mile. We have our Cedar Grove Fire Station, and then our man station is just about 4 more miles down the road.
Is that Santa Fe County volunteers or Santa Fe County paid staff?
Cedar Grove is a volunteer, but our paid staff is at the 344.
How
Over
far
1
away
minute.
is that from the shop?
About 4 miles.
4 miles? Okay, no further questions. Thank you.
Renee, I have one question. So in order, if there was if you had to fight a fire at his residence or at his place, you guys would have to use pumpers?
Yes, we would do a pupper tanker shuttle for his residence and shop.
All right, thank you.
I also have a question for Renee. Hi, Renee.
Hello, Mr. Shepherd.
On page NBA 16 in our package, it talks about access fire protection, and it talks about the existing driveway needs to be improved. I didn't see that in any of the conditions, so I don't know where that went.
Mr. Chair, Commission Member Shepherd, that's what the applicant is actually proposing to upgrade it to, which does meet our requirements. So he's been working on making the improvements. But, and it does meet our requirements. He's actually building it out more than what the code requires for this type of development.
At this point in time, it does not meet our requirements, but the petitioner is saying it will meet our requirements?
It actually does meet our requirements at this point, but he's actually upgrading it even beyond what we would require.
Thank you. Thank you, Renee.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd. Commission?
Thank you. This is a public hearing. I'm going to open it up. Is there anybody out there that wants to speak in favor or against this project? Being that I see nobody out there for this, I'm going to close the public hearing. Does the commission have any other questions, discussion, or motions?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Shepherd.
the one thing that I don't see addressed is spillage, especially on the outdoor rack. You get a car up there and you start taking the transmission pan off because you're doing a transmission service, and the thing starts gushing. I've been there myself. I've actually spilled that transmission fluid all over me while I'm trying to get it down. Where is all that spillage going?
I have a lot of pans and that sort of thing for automotive fluids. I catch it as good as I can, and it goes into the recycling barrels for Crystal Clean to pick up. Anything else that hits the ground, I have like a cat litter kind of stuff for automotive fluids that is utilized to soak everything up and be disposed of.
The outdoor lift, are any of the hydraulics underground, or is it all above ground?
It's all above ground, self-contained unit. I bought it 3 years ago, so it's a fairly new model.
And the pad that it's on, how far does that extend beyond the lift?
The pad itself is 24 feet long, and I believe 24 wide, and it sits pretty much centered in one side of the concrete.
Thank you.
I have one more question, too. Is the surface that you're working on, is it concrete?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, again, does the commission have any questions, discussion, or motions for this project?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to approve case number CUP 18-5240, conditional use permit application, Cedar Grove Auto Repair and Performance, with approval of the hearing officer and the staff recommendations.
No other conditions? We're okay with existing conditions?
I'm sorry?
We're okay with existing conditions?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second? Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion passes. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Let's get started with the next case. Case number MIS 19-5020, Cimarron Village 1 Convenience Store and Service Station Final Development Plan Amendment. Jose, please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, yes.
I just want to put on the record,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to put on the record. Okay. Approximately 20 years ago, I had the opportunity to represent Mr. Miller, who's the applicant, at the Cimarron subdivision, which is located about a mile south of this application. It's where the veterinary clinic, El Dorado Area Water and Sanitation District is located, and on Alma Drive, which is also the entrance to the Ridges subdivision. I do not have any relationship with Mr. Miller since then. I've known Mr. Miller and Mr. Martinez for all those years, and I feel that I can act impartially on this matter, but I wanted to put it out if anybody in the public or the applicant has any reason to ask me to step aside, be happy to recuse myself.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Jose, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. JAKG Petroleum applicant land development planning agent requests approval of an amendment of a note placed on the approved final development plan, which states there will be no liquor sales at this location. The site is within the Cimarron Village Plan Development District and within the US 285 South Highway Corridor District overlay. The site takes access from Colinas Drive via US 84 285 and is located at number 6 Colinas Drive within Township 15 North, Range 10 East, Section 9 and 16, SDA 2, Commission District 5. The applicant requests the removal of a note on the recorded preliminary and final development plan for Cimarron Village 1. The note states, there will be no liquor sales at this location. The applicant states that the parcel falls within a planned development district with a current recorded master plan that allows liquor sales consistent with ordinance number 2016-9, the Sustainable Land Development Code, which allows liquor sales in a planned development district. On June 26, 1995, a master plan was recorded for Cimarron Village, which allowed restaurants and bars. On March 6, 1996, an amended master plan was recorded for Cimarron Village, which prohibited restaurants and bars and the sale of liquor. On July 24, 2001, Joe Miller recorded a revocation statement and re-recorded the 1996 amended master plan, stating that the amended master plan was revoked. The revocation reinstated the 1995 master plan. On May 28, 1998, the County Development Review Committee approved CDRC case number DP 98-5140, preliminary and final development plan for Cimarron Village 1, convenience store and gas station. In the minutes of the May 28, 1998 hearing, duly sworn Kathy Pilnock asked the CDRC to prohibit fast food, liquor, and maintain hours from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. Mr. Joe Miller stated they have reworded the master plan to prohibit any liquor sales on the property. CDRC member Louis Gonzalez commented that with the applicant's prohibition against the sale of liquor on the property, he was willing to allow the applicant to sell gas at all hours. This was the only discussion during the hearing on the sale of liquor at this site. On June 10, 2008, an amended master plan was recorded which allows liquor sales and restaurants with beer and wine and liquor. The 2008 amended master plan is the current master plan for Cimarron Village. The approval of the preliminary and final development plan for the convenience store and gas station by the CDRC did not include a condition not to allow liquor sales. However, a note was placed on the approved recorded preliminary and final development plan which prohibits alcohol sales on this site in accordance with the statement from the CDRC member. The current amended master plan for the Cimarron Village subdivision lists liquor sales as an approved use. The Cimarron Village Plan Development District is allowed the uses that are listed in the approved amended master plan as a permitted use. Ordinance number 2016-9, the Sustainable Land Development Code, states existing approvals identified as PD section 8.10.10.1 states, in order to recognize existing approvals that do not fit into a base zoning district, the developments that have received master plan approval prior to the effective date of the SLDC are identified on the zoning map. SLDC section 8.10.10.2 states, the approved developments shall be developed in accordance with the governed by and restricted to the densities, uses, and conditions identified on the approved master plan, plat, or development plan. Building and Development Services staff has reviewed this request for compliance with pertinent code requirements and finds the following facts to support this request. The prohibition of liquor sales on this site was not a condition of approval by the CDRC. The amended master plan allows for liquor sales on this site. The Cimarron Village Plan Development District is allowed the uses listed in the approved amended master plan as a permitted use. Staff recommendation, approval of the applicant's request to remove the note on the recorded preliminary and final development plan which states there will be no liquor sales at this location, subject to the following condition. Condition, the applicant shall re-record the final development plan which permits the sale of liquor on this site as per the 2008 amended master plan for Cimarron Village. This report and the exhibits listed below are hereby submitted as part of the hearing record. Mr. Chair, I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Jose. Does the commission have any questions of staff?
I have a question.
Fred, please do.
If the prohibition on liquor had been put in as a condition, would it alter the recommendation that staff is making?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, If it would have been put as a condition, it would have to gone through a separate process since it's a public, a PD, a Plan Development District. It may have to have gone through a conceptual plan to add that condition onto it. So, yeah, we would have had a different process to get that condition or that use into the PD.
And how would that process have been different?
Would have had to gone through a conceptual plan to amend the plan development to allow that use.
Okay. If it was discussed back in the CDRC hearing, is it just an error at that hearing that it was not made a condition, since it was discussed by Ms. Pilnock and Mr. Gonzalez and acknowledged by Mr. Miller that there would be no liquor sales?
I can't speak that it was an error. Just going straight off the minutes on what was discussed, that was the only discussion in the entire hearing.
Their notice has been put on 285, Highway 285, for how long now of this hearing?
It went up 15 days prior to this hearing.
To your knowledge, has the county received any inquiries from the public concerning this application?
I received one phone call from the vice president of the Dos Gregos Homeowners Association.
From the what?
The Dos Gregos Homeowners Association. Once I explained what the applicant was requesting, he said they shouldn't have a problem with it. And no other letters, no other phone calls.
Do you recall that gentleman's name?
I do not.
So that's the only inquiry from the public was from the president of the Dos Gregos HOA?
Vice president, yes, and yes, that's the only inquiry that came to my office.
And this application affects the area that is the gas station right now, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions of staff? Okay, is the applicant here to make a presentation?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, my name is Suzanne Odom. I'm the attorney for the applicant, JAKG Petroleum. I'd like to make one little point of clarification. JAKG Petroleum leases the land from Joe Miller and is the applicant here, and they operate the station. So that is why, but Danny Martinez is also here in case you have any questions of the owner and the owner's consent for this application. I think that staff has done a very good job of briefing this issue, but on the issue of community response to this, I actually reached out directly to the main El Dorado Community Association, and I'm drawing a blank.
El Dorado Community Improvement Association?
Yes. I reached out directly. I spoke with their general manager and asked to please be alerted if there were any concerns with this application, and volunteered that we would meet with anybody who had any concerns to discuss them with them. And I also reached out to Catherine Toll, who is the head of the US 285 Corridor Coalition. Incidentally, that's the person who spoke out, or that's the association that spoke out against it originally. And I have not received any word back, despite a phone call and an email to please contact me if there was any concern. But with those brief comments, I would like to introduce my clients, the managing partners of JAKG, Jay Anand and Kevin Gandy, and we collectively stand for questions.
Okay. Does the commission have any questions of the applicant?
So if I understand you correctly, you contacted the general manager for the El Dorado Community Improvement Association. You received no communication from what's commonly called the ECIA. nor any communication from any board of director from the ECIA.
That is correct. And when I spoke with the general manager, I want to say her name is Julie, she did mention that several staff members actually were there when they got the notice of this hearing and actually expressed support for the change.
Can you say that again, please, a little louder?
The general manager mentioned that there were staff members present when this application came in and they opened the mail on it. And people actually expressed support for the change.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chair,
JJ?
I've got a couple of questions. How many gas stations does JAKG operate in the area?
I'm going to turn that question over to Kevin Gandy. He is the operations side.
Mr. Gandy, can I swear you in? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give is the truth?
Yes.
Could you
Yes.
state your name and address for the record?
Kevin Gandy, 1708 Winding Hollow in McKinney, Texas. Yes, sir. We have 3 stores that we operate in the Santa Fe, Albuquerque area.
Where are those stores located? Is that Phillips 66, or what's your brand that you...
Phillips 66 Fuel. We have one in Pecos, we have one in Los Lunas, and we have the one on El Dorado.
And how many of those locations sell liquor?
One, the Pecos location.
And what is, as far as margins go, what is the breakdown between a station that sells liquor and a station that sells gasoline and you know, your mini mart or whatever you have on 285?
Well, the norm for a convenience store is, at least in New Mexico, alcohol will actually about 28 to 30% of your sales. And so in a non-store, of course, it's nothing. So it is a significant sales increase for those that do have their licenses.
And another question, if right now you operate the El Dorado store 24 hours a day?
No.
No, how many hours a day does that?
It's 5 a.m. to 10 p.m., 7 days a week.
And if you're allowed to sell liquor there, would you increase hours or it'd be about the same?
No, it'd be the same hours.
Yeah. You know, I'm kind of concerned about all the high-profile cases with drunk drivers in the El Dorado area. You know, I don't know if you're familiar, if you're from this local area or where you're based at, but, you know, they had some horrific DWI cases there. And I'm very concerned about having more liquor sales on those stations that maybe just deal with transient drivers, you know, going through, need a six-pack to get to Pecos or Las Vegas. I'm very concerned about that.
Well, we are too. I mean, we, myself, as a partner in JKG, I'm the operating partner, and I actually have operated over 3,400 stores around the country and have had over 3,000 alcohol licenses in my name. So I'm very diligent because my name's on all those. And so we actually do internal stings ourselves, or internal checks. So between ourselves and the local authorities that do their own checks, at least once a month, our stores are actually checked, which is the best way to keep everything in line. But, you know, we have policies, procedures for employees. Every new hire has to go through certain training before they even get to start on the clock behind the register. And so we take it all very seriously.
I have another question. In your stores that you operate, how many times have you been cited for selling alcohol to minors or to over-the-limit customers?
I've never had one over the limit, and I've had around 10 in my 35 years of selling to a minor.
So you think you're prepared to have another layer of regulations on your station because you're selling liquor?
Is that something you're comfortable with in this area?
Yes, we are. And, we sell liquor. It's a big portion of our sales. It's actually about 45% of our sales at the Pecos store, which is in the next county. I'm not familiar with the county name, but and the Pecos store, it's the only one that sells alcohol in the entire county. And so we sell a lot there. And we've had no problem and will not have any problem because we're very diligent about it. We also used to have an operation in Espanola that sold alcohol before it closed down and went out of business, and we had no incidents there either.
Well, the Pecos area, the demographics there is different. It's a village.
It is.
El Dorado is, people, they don't stop by there. There's a store there, the grocery store that sells liquor, restaurant that sell beer and wine, and people that would come to your store would be the ones that want to fuel their cars and then move either to 285 or east to Las Vegas.
Correct.
I'm just concerned about, more liquor sales in that area.
Well, I will say one thing on the Pecos store. It is a small village, small town, but actually the majority of our sales are from the visitors that come up there and do the fishing and the hunting and things and the camping and the hiking. We've noticed that now. We've had that store for almost 2 years. And I've actually realized the majority of our sales are to all the visitors in the area. Right now, we're actually down in sales because the area has had a drought, so it's restricted the visitors. So it impacts our business a lot. But that store also sells fuel. All of my locations around the country sell fuel, and we're extremely diligent about all that. And we have never had an incident in my 35 years and over 3,400 stores of selling to anybody who is already inebriated and shouldn't be buying or.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, JJ. Does the commission have any other questions of the applicant?
Yes, I do.
Fred, go ahead.
Are you aware of the number of fatal traffic incidences at the intersection of Avenida, El Dorado, and Highway 285?
No, sir.
There have been several over the years of, especially due to people not slowing down as they're heading south on 285. I just wanted to volunteer that for the last, 5, 6, 7 years, I maintain partake in the Adopt a Road program within El Dorado. Over the years, and it's increasing, the biggest things that we pick up adjacent to the road are small shot bottles. It used to be trash from fast food outlets, but now it is the small shot bottles, whether they are residents or because that you do have close to 2,700 homes physically in El Dorado, service industry people, coming in and out of El Dorado. And my concern is, right now, the only place in the immediate area that you can buy the smaller bottles would be at the Agora grocery store. This would give another outlet for people to purchase that type of alcohol. And in my observations, and I may be wrong, I guess you could go through your records, but I think because of the cost of the fuel that the station charges, that the majority of El Dorado residents prefer to go to town, that my gut is that the majority of your gasoline traffic is transient traffic. And I'm really concerned because I know the community is trying to work with the highway department to alter the speed limit or put additional signage up onto 285. Just recently, the past, I think she was the chairperson of the Democratic Party for Santa Fe County, was making a right-hand turn coming out of Avenida Vista Grande and was killed by a truck that did not slow down for a red light. And I see that over and over again. I've had a very dear friend of mine make a left-hand turn coming out of Avenida Vista Grande onto 285 and got broadsided by a car. Now, I can't tell you that in either of those incidences that alcohol was involved, but I do have a genuine concern of that specific location opening up another venue for people to stop in and down a shot or two and go on their way and not be observant of what's going on in the traffic. 285 is a very heavily trafficked area, and in fact, if I've even seen not too long ago the whip trucks starting to come down 285.
Well, a couple things, if I may. Number one, there is no consumption on premise, and we're very, very strict about that. So
Not talking about consumption on premises, but people come in, get gas, buy a small bottle, get in their car, down it, and then are going to come across 285 to make a service call to residents within El Dorado or Dos Griegos or Belicia, you name it.
Yeah.
That is my concern. Or turning on either the way to the highway.
And as far as our mix within our store, what we have realized now, we've been there since 2012. And we look at our mix constantly because it helps us with, marketing the store, the right products to have in there and things. And actually, a little less than 60% of our trade is actually our business workers, landscapers, but they're workers that come in because in the morning and lunch are actually the biggest times where actually our slowest time of the day is after 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Any other questions of the applicant? Are you guys gonna be selling miniatures and half pints and pints there at your store?
Yes, that would be behind the counter, non-self-serve.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to open up the public hearing. Anybody out there that wants to speak in favor or against this project? I don't see anybody. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. Does the commission have any questions, discussion, or motions? Anybody? Any other questions?
I have a question of staff.
Okay.
What happens if there is no motion?
Good question.
Nobody is stepping forward to a motion to approve or deny. What happens if that continues?
I'll make that question moot by making a motion.
Thank you, Frank.
I would move to, in case number miscellaneous, I assume miscellaneous, 19-5020, Cimarron Village Convenience Store, I would move to follow the recommendation of staff and approve the application as submitted with the conditions listed.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Oppose.
2 opposing? Does it pass?
You going to do a roll call?
Yeah, let's do a roll call.
Okay. Mr. Lopez? Yes. Mr. Shepherd?
I'm going to vote no.
Mr. Gonzalez?
I vote no.
Mr. Katz?
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. Okay, the next case,
Or hearing, public hearing.
the case is a public hearing. Ordinance number 2019, an ordinance amending the Sustainable Land Development Code, ordinance number 2016-9, to restate Chapter 11, developments of countywide impact, adopt regulations for mineral resource extraction and processing, and add information to appendix. Mr. Stock, please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commission members. My name is Jacob Stock. I'm with the Planning Division at Santa Fe County, and I've been working on this project along with other county staff. I'll be presenting on the proposed amendments to Chapter 11 of the Sldc concerning developments of countywide impact, or DCIs as we call them. This will be a general overview of the ordinance that we're proposing. After that, I'll request, yes.
Mr. Shepherd, you have something?
Is your presentation the exact one that's in our package?
Yes, it is.
Mr. Stock, hold on, I got one question. First of all, just before we start, for the county attorney. I was kind of concerned because on the ordinance it says changing the sand and gravel operation and or modifications to it, but we're also changing or modifying the DCIs. Being that wasn't mentioned, is this legal to continue?
Mr. Chair, what are you referring to specifically?
Well, the actual advertisement is
The public noticer?
yeah, it's a public notice. And it's, and it's for, it says, developments of countywide impact of the Sustainable Land Development Code to adopt regulations for mineral resource extraction and processing and add definitions to Appendix A. And it doesn't mention anything about modifying DCIs. I just want to make sure that we're legal.
Mr. Chair, Commission members, the ordinance restates Chapter 11, the DCIs. So it is restating. We have existing regulations for the DCIs. The noticing that we did was pretty specific to how we were changing that section. Do you have a copy of that noticing?
That's correct.
Can we get a copy?
Oh, sorry.
No, the actual one that we did in the paper.
Oh, that was published in the
Yes.
paper? We have the text of it, but we don't have the.
Okay, where is that?
printed copy.
So I'm just getting the actual text of what was noticed. So it does go through what we're changing in all of Chapter 11, including clarifying the application procedures for a DCI overlay zoning district and DCI conditional use permit, including review criteria, establish requirements for financial guarantees, clarifying requirements for SRAs, adding requirements for plans and reports, and then it also goes on to specifically the mineral resource extraction and processing, which is the hard rock mining section.
Okay, so we're safe then.
The legal noticing was reviewed by legal, and I think it's pretty comprehensive that it covers this. But in order for it the code not to look kind of like the red line version is here,
Right.
we're restating the whole of Chapter 11. And that means you can pull the old Chapter 11 and insert the new one.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Mr. Stock, please proceed. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the presentation that I'm about to give, as I said before, it's going to be a general overview of the proposed amendments to Chapter 11 of the Sldc. The presentation is in your packet. It's also projected behind you. So after my presentation, I'll request that the Planning Commission open a public hearing on the proposed amendments. And After that, I'll ask that the Planning Commission make a recommendation to the board regarding the ordinance to amend Chapter 11. In this presentation, I'll start with the definition of developments of countywide impact, or DCIs, the rationale for these amendments, the process for developing the proposed amendments, an overview of the amendments, and a proposed schedule before standing for questions from the Planning Commission. So the SLDC defines developments of countywide impact as developments which place major demands on public facilities and budget, affect the environment, health, safety, and welfare beyond immediately neighboring properties, and create serious adverse noise, light, odor, vibration, and traffic impacts on the county. DCIs currently...
Excuse me again, do we need to go down here and sit?
You can see it.
Ours is on. The others are not on. Is there a way they could turn theirs on so they can see it? I hadn't realized that this is...
Yes, it's also printed, the slides are printed in your packet. And so you can follow along there as well.
What?
Where
whichever you
exactly
prefer.
are you reading from in the packet so I can follow along, please?
I think it's just the...
So it is after... After Exhibit D.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
No, I know where.
Thank you.
And I believe the presentation up here is for all the members of the audience. They were hoping.
Okay, so the presentation up here is the same thing that's just here?
It's the same presentation, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair. Okay, so DCIs currently identified in the SLDC include landfills, junkyards, and large-scale sand and gravel extraction and processing. Oil and gas production is regulated under a separate ordinance. Concentrated animal feeding operations, or feedlots, are reserved, and regulations for mining and resource extraction are addressed in the proposed amendments that I'll be detailing later on. The Sustainable Growth Management Plan, or SGMP, calls for DCI regulations that protect scenic vistas and natural landscapes, environment, flora habitats, wildlife corridors and habitats, environmentally sensitive areas, wetlands, rivers and streams, and flood hazard areas, archaeological, historical, and cultural resources, and the health, safety, and general welfare of county residents. The SGMP also identifies developments that may be regulated as DCIs. These are largely the same as the developments listed in the SLDC, with the addition of wind farms and major reshaping of land surfaces. Section 2.2.6.2 of the SGMP sets out the rationale for these proposed amendments. It states the county's regulations and standards for hard rock mining will be updated and incorporated into the SLDC as developments of countywide impact. This, put simply, is what we're proposing to do with this ordinance. The SLDC was adopted in December 2016 with Chapter 11 regulating DCIs. We were not able to complete the mining regulations at that time. Section 11.13 reserves regulations for mining and resource extraction, while regulations from 1996 remain in place. The proposed amendments introduce new mining regulations consistent with the SLDC and in accordance with the SGMP. Our goal in developing these proposed amendments to Chapter 11 was to create a complete and reasonable regulatory process that prevents negative environmental and social impacts, avoids long-term treatment requirements, requires the operator to bear all present and future costs associated with the DCI, and establishes regulations for mineral resource extraction and processing. So the resulting amendments clarify and establish requirements applicable to all DCIs, address errors and clarify language in the chapter, clarify procedures for DCI overlay zoning districts and conditional use permits, which I'll go over later in the presentation, and of course establish regulations for mineral resource extraction and processing. So staff carried out an extensive process to develop these proposed amendments. We held multiple meetings with stakeholders in the community and received public comments during the public comment period and 4 public meetings during that period. All public comments were recorded on a spreadsheet that's included in your packet. That's Exhibit C, I believe. So in each row of that spreadsheet, it includes a comment from the public, staff's analysis of the comment, and any action taken on the comment in preparing the draft of the proposed amendments that we're presenting today. Some comments, including requests for transmission line regulations and reclamation standards independent of a new DCI, were determined to be beyond the scope of this process. Others, including increased protection for wildlife and additional performance standards for mines, were addressed in this draft. We also reviewed mining regulations and standards from other counties and from around the world. We worked with a national expert in mine regulation and consulted with state agencies in New Mexico charged with mine regulation at the state level. So now I'm going to go into a little more detail about the contents of the DCI regulation and the proposed amendments. I'll keep it pretty general. So first is the procedure. An applicant to operate a DCI in the county is required to obtain a DCI overlay zoning district and all applicable federal and state permits before applying for the DCI conditional use permit, which would allow someone to operate a DCI in the county. Both the overlay and the permit process have separate application requirements, which I'll go over later, and require hearings before the hearing officer, planning commission, and the Board of County Commissioners. So getting into the contents of the amendments, all changes are in the red line document, which is included in your packet. These are red lines that were created off of the version of Chapter 11 that's currently in the SLDC. So Section 11.5 sets out general regulations applying to all DCIs. We identified existing regulations in Chapter 11 that should be applicable to all DCIs and brought them into this section. For example, we felt that language on existing uses should apply to all DCIs, not just particular DCIs. We also clarified some confusing language that was in the chapter. The most significant addition to this section is the section on financial guarantees. These generally ensure that the county is able to recover the cost of reviewing the application and monitoring and enforcing compliance with the permit, to recover costs to public facilities and services, and to secure an adequate financial guarantee to reclaim the site and remediate any potential damages caused by the DCI. Section 11.6 sets out the requirements for a DCI overlay zoning district application and review. Much of this section was unchanged from the existing Chapter 11. The proposed amendments add to required studies and reports and assessments, and they include requirements that the applicant demonstrate that they will not impede on the water rights of others, that the cost of environmental impacts are calculated as fiscal impacts, and that they have previously, the operator has previously complied with laws and regulations in other municipalities. Section 11.7 sets out the requirements for a conditional use permit. Each class of DCI has its own supplemental requirements for a conditional use permit in addition to section 11.7. But the requirements in this section apply to all DCIs, so the supplemental requirements would be in addition to this. The proposed additions to this section include requirements for proof of technical and financial feasibility of the project, a report on previous business practices, a plan for handling hazardous materials, and a plan for reducing and offsetting emissions associated with the DCI. Performance standards are proposed as a new section in Chapter 11, setting standards for DCIs during operation once they're permitted. Some important elements of this section include standards for the protection of water quality and quantity, the financial feasibility of the operation, and continued demonstration of compliance with air quality standards. So getting into section 11.14, these are supplemental requirements in addition to 11.1 and through 11.7, applying to mineral resource extraction and processing. So the design criteria are really the foundation of the mining section. These are standards applying to all mining applications, operation, and closure of a mine. They're meant to start as a basic criteria for evaluating a mine application. This section states that there will be no degradation of water resources, no perpetual treatment of water and other resources, and that the mine will be designed to withstand a 1,000-year flooding event. The supplemental requirements for a mining conditional use permit are, in addition, again, to the general requirements for all DCIs in section 11.7. Generally, the proposed amendments create a process which focuses on collecting baseline environmental conditions, modeling the potential effects of a mine on those baseline conditions, proving that a mine proposal meets the county's design criteria and standards, and providing additional financial guarantees required for a mining operation. The application requirements are designed to generally follow this process that I explained in the previous slide. They require baseline data collection, project description, environmental studies, and operating closure and reclamation plans. The section also includes performance standards. These are standards designed to ensure compliance during mine operation and act as contingency measures against possible noncompliance. So this concludes my summary of the proposed amendments to Chapter 11. Before I stand for questions from the Planning Commission and from the public, I'll briefly review our proposed schedule. Last week, the board directed staff to publish title and general summary of an ordinance to amend Chapter 11. Today, we will hold a public hearing to ask that the Planning Commission make a recommendation to the board regarding the ordinance. We anticipate a second public hearing before the board on April 9th as well. And this is where the board may consider taking action on the ordinance. So this concludes my presentation, and I'll stand for questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Does the commission have any questions?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Shepherd?
as you know, I live in Madrid, coal mining town. We got lots of piles of mining waste. Is that when somebody wants to take that mining waste away, is that considered sand and gravel, or is that considered mineral resource extraction and processing?
Mr. Shepherd, it's my understanding that that would be considered a sand and gravel operation.
Because when I look at the definition of mineral resource extraction and processing on the definitions that were, I think, approved, the process of obtaining a mineral from Earth's crust or from previously disposed or abandoned mining waste
You know what this acronym
is what it says,
American Professional Firefighter.
including open-cut mining surface operations.
I don't see it.
But the fact that it says from previously disposed or abandoned mining waste suggests that mineral resource extraction and processing includes what we call tipple piles.
So, Mr. Shepherd, if you look to the definition for a mineral, it states that this does not include sand and gravel mining defined herein. So, in that case, if the gob piles, as we call them, are going to be used as aggregate, then that would be, my understanding would be, that would be defined as sand and gravel.
And I don't understand what this definition means, because that sounded pretty clear to me when it says from previously disposed or abandoned mining waste. I can't think of a phrase that describes a tipple pile any clearer than that. And that's in definition C, mineral resource extraction and processing.
Eric, do you have?
I just need some clarification because I'm really confused as to how that is sand and gravel.
Mr. Shepherd, it's my understanding that the land use department interprets the definitions more limited than I believe you're reading them here. The land use department has made a determination, it's my understanding, that those gob piles and their reclamation fall under the sand and gravel requirements, not under the proposed mining ordinance.
Well, then perhaps that section should be deleted from this definition. If it doesn't apply, it shouldn't be in the definition.
Mr. Chair, Commission members, it is not this, the definitions are added specifically for the hard rock mining section, and so they're not intended in any way to change the sand and gravel section, and that's why mineral is defined and states, but it does not include sand and gravel mining. So there's not an intention to change that. We will certainly look at the mineral resource extraction and processing definition to see if that does need a change.
I'm sorry. This really is confusing because it says the process of obtaining a mineral from the Earth's crust, which I imagine includes, in Madra's case, coal, or from previously disposed or abandoned mining waste, which would come from coal. Is there something in the sand and gravel mining definition that specifically says mining waste?
Commissioner Shepherd, I don't believe so. But as I said earlier, it's the land use department's interpretation of the existing regulations that those gob piles are subject to the sand and gravel requirements. If the applicant or if the person who owns those gob piles wants to argue that they should be subject to the mineral resource extraction and processing requirements, they certainly can do so. But I believe that those requirements would be considerably more stringent than the sand and gravel requirements.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd. Any other questions? Susan?
This is just a point of clarification, an acronym, I don't know, under 11.6.2.4, whether adequate public facilities identified in the APFSA either exist or have been funded. Can you tell me that acronym, what that stands for?
Oh, I see.
Under review criteria?
Yes, I see it. Commission Member Martin, the acronym there stands for Adequate Public Facilities Assessment.
And that's someplace else in the document. It's not, I mean, I know it's not one of these proposed new definitions, but it is elsewhere.
It's my understanding that that would be under Chapter 6, Studies, Reports, and Assessments, where that's defined.
Mr. Chair,
Thank you, Fred?
I have
Please.
a question. Coming back to Mr. Shepard's comments, why can it not be clarified so as to avoid any ambiguity which could cause additional hearings and issues to be raised so that there is no confusion?
Penny, would you like to?
Depend what the piles are. If the piles are excess coal.
Commissioner, I'd like to answer it this way. The answer to your question depends on the facts about the piles at issue. That is a matter for the application of the regulations, which Land Use Department would do upon the receipt of a proper application. They would look at the application, look at the facts regarding the piles or whatever the materials are that are to be processed, and make a determination which set of regulations apply. In the abstract, it is difficult for us sitting here today to change or to modify a definition to deal with a set of facts that we don't currently have before us. So I think what your question really draws on, or really highlights, is the distinction between the process of writing general regulations and the process of applying those regulations. At this point in time, we are trying to write regulations to address a broad range of circumstances, the details of which we cannot entirely foresee. When a case comes to the Land Use Department with specific facts that the Land Use Department can evaluate, then they can determine which set of regulations should apply.
And if Mr. Chair, and if an applicant disagrees, then they can appeal that decision.
Absolutely. And your point, Commissioner, about there being more appeals potentially is always an issue to be considered, but that's how the process works. We start with rules of general applicability, which these regulations are, and then applicants apply, and if they're dissatisfied, or the public is dissatisfied with the decision rendered by the Land Use Department, then that matter will be brought to the Planning Commission, then to the Board of County Commissioners if necessary to clarify whether the Land Use Department, or to confirm or deny whether the Land Use Department correctly applied the rules of general applicability.
Thank you.
Mr. Katz?
I'm really fuzzy on all of this, being so inexpert on it, but it does sound to me as though mining waste is sometimes to be treated as sand and gravel and sometimes not. And what the question that occurs to me is, well, on what basis? Are there some guidelines? Is there some rules? Is there some policy decision being made that, yeah, we'll treat it as sand and gravel in these kinds of situations, and we'll treat it as something else that might be more scary in another situation? And I guess it occurs to me maybe that should be spelled out someplace a little bit, if it's possible.
Commissioner Katz, it's an interesting concept you raised. I'm not sure that at this point in time we are in a place where we can define which types of mining waste should be regulated under which set of regulations. As I said earlier, it really is a matter of evaluating the facts regarding a particular application, and then we can make the decision.
Is it so unclear as to, I mean, what kind of facts? I mean, someone's there who's going to look at an application and say, under this circumstances, yes, and under this circumstances, no. Why is that so hard to talk about?
Mr. Chair, Commission members, for example, the piles that are in Madrid, the question would be, is what are you going to use them for? Are you going to use it for sand and gravel to put on a road? And then that's probably sand and gravel. Are they coal and only coal that are going to be used for a mineral? Then that falls under hard rock mining. Or are they the dirt and stone that come out and rock that come out before you get to the coal that is going to be used for sand and gravel? So on any given situation, those are the questions that we would need to ask to know which one you fall into.
That certainly makes it clearer for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I believe what you're saying about the coal, those would be called tailings, right? The overburden that you're talking, they're called tailings from that type of mining? Okay, they are. Okay, they are. All right, thank you. All right, okay, anybody else have any questions?
Mr.
Comments?
Chair?
JJ.
I've got a couple of questions to Mr. Stock. You mentioned you met with stakeholders. Now, were those people from the mining industry, or were they, what do you consider a stakeholder to be?
Commission Member Gonzalez, there were members representing the mining industry, representing sand and gravel extraction, representing environmental groups and community groups in Santa Fe County that participated in the stakeholder process at various times in the process.
Okay, the other thing I have is as far as the public review, members of the public, how many, you have four hearings or 4 meetings? And
yes, sir.
And at the meetings, how well attended were they?
Commission Member Gonzalez, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. I can tell you that we had approximately 65 comments that were recorded from the public during the public comment period, and I believe our attendance was in the range of 30 to 40 people throughout the 4 meetings, but we also got comments from people over the phone and by email, and people who came into our office as well.
Commissioner Gonzalez?
Yes.
Yes. Interrupt for a second. Exhibit C to the county's exhibits is a spreadsheet that shows all the comments that the county received. In addition, I'd like to point out, in addition to the folks that Jacob mentioned that we met with, we also met with representatives of the state Minerals, Natural Resources Department and Environment Department, and actually had meetings with them and consulted with them to ensure that we had addressed issues correctly and consistently with state law and regulation.
Yes, I did see that, and those are the questions I had. You know, I wanted to see internal review, you know, that you did it in-house, and some of the people that on staff. The other ones were the outside experts. Like, I wanted to know, like, who were the outside experts that you consulted with?
So, Commission Member Gonzalez, we contracted with Spectrum Engineering out of, I believe, Bozeman, Montana. They're engineering firm in Montana that specializes in mine engineering and mine regulations, and they've assisted states and counties to a similar capacity. So we worked with them as a technical expert, as well as consulting with representatives from the state, as Eric noted.
And how long were they on your payroll, or how long did they contract with you to do your reviews?
Yeah, it's been about a year that we've been contracting with them.
Yeah. Okay, well, good. The other questions I have is that I had a question about you know, all the cost associated with you know, an application for mining or whatever it is, and it seems that you know, the cost, it seems to me that they're very prohibitive as far as, you know, allowing anybody to have an application that they can, you know, maybe see something that's feasible. You know, I see some of the costs here, like they might have to build whatever facilities are necessary to conduct their business. They don't even have an application to start extracting any minerals, but yet you're required to maybe improve roads, you know, build bridges. I mean, it seems that this is very prohibitive as far as, you know, encouraging anybody to do any extracting in Santa Fe County. I mean, I was sat on when they did the oil and gas, and that was so prohibitive to industry that I think they just decided not to do anything in Santa Fe County. And it seems that this is very similar, to that ordinance for the oil and gas. You have any comments on that?
So, Commission member.
That's on page 4.
Yes.
It's.
So, Commission member Gonzalez, just a point of clarification, an applicant wouldn't be required to construct roads or bridges or any public facilities for the county before being issued a permit. Those would be conditions of the permit. As far as the cost of reviewing a permit and producing an application, staff has determined that the costs associated with not properly vetting applications is worth the effort.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, JJ. Mr. Katz?
I have to admit that I had very much the exact same reaction that JJ described as I was reading through this for the first time. And I said, boy, there are a lot of regulations. Boy, there are a lot of hoops that we are asking the applicants to jump through. There are a lot of things that they have to provide, a lot of information, probably cost them a pretty penny. And then as I thought about it, I said, well, it seems to me that what the county is asking for are exactly the kinds of information that I would want my county government to find the answers to before we allow someone to start on one of these projects and then leave the rest of us here holding the bag on cleaning it up or dealing with some of the ramifications while the project is going on. So, I can understand that it does seem a little bit formidable, but then thinking about the kinds of spills and whatever that we've seen so publicized recently, yeah, I guess I really want the county to do that and to find out the answers to these questions. So I appreciate the work that the county has done in drafting this.
Right. Susan, did you have something?
I have a question for you. I think in your presentation you said that you had consulted with a mining law expert. Is that correct? Did you say that?
Commission member Martin, I believe that I stated that we consulted with mining experts, and so that's in reference
And
to
that was the
Spectrum
firm?
Engineering.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, I also want to say something about this, about the rules and stuff. I kind of agree with Frank and JJ a little bit. One thing I am concerned about is that in Santa Fe County, a lot of people use base course. Santa Fe County, City of Santa Fe puts it as conditions of approval to build roads and stuff. I am kind of concerned that some of these tougher regulations are going to spike up the price of base course for everybody in Santa Fe County, Santa Fe. So with that said, does anybody else have any questions over here in the commission?
Mr. Chair.
Can we address your point?
Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, Plan Commission members, the base course, so sand and gravel, is already designated as a DCI. There are already standards in the code. So what has happened here is we will be restating Chapter 11, and some of the sections that are in the individual sections for landfill, sand and gravel, have been pulled forward to the front because they're relevant to every DCI, but the actual requirements for sand and gravel are already in the land development code. So this is specifically adding conditions and adding regulations for hard rock mining.
Okay, nothing for the sand and gravel?
Sand and gravel has been amended as far as sections being pulled around, moved from one place to another, but Jacob, can you confirm we haven't got this is not a wholesale rewrite of the sand and gravel section. That exists today. If you're to submit for sand and gravel, it's already a DCI. Right. It was included in our growth management plan as being a DCI. It does follow the same general requirements of creating a DCI overlay and creating a conditional use permit for the DCI that the oil and gas ordinance started. So it does follow that same regulation. At the moment, we have landfills, sand and gravel.
Jacob, I don't recall off the top of my head. We have landfills, sand and gravel, junkyards,
Yeah, landfills, sand and gravel, junkyards,
and oil and gas.
and oil and gas, which is in a separate ordinance, yes.
So the oil and gas section of Chapter 11 actually refers you to the original oil and gas ordinance, but the other three sections are already written in here. The hard rock mining section right now refers you to 1996-10, which is the old land development code. It's imperative that we update it and put it into this code because it has different procedures, different bodies that are no longer in place under this code. And so when the commissioners approved, the Board of County Commissioners approved this code, they did ask us for the next section that we write it to be the hard rock mining, so there isn't that issue about which code falls in place if somebody comes in for hard rock mining. And so that's what we're trying to do now, is to actually write that section that was reserved in the 1996 version of this code.
Okay. So being that the sand and gravel is already a DCI, any changes to the DCI will impact the sand and gravel as well, correct?
The overall changes as far as where findings are and what regulated for all DCIs, they have been moved around. So some have been pulled forward, so we don't need to reiterate for each section that you need this, this study. There are some, Jacob may be able to point you, or Eric to point you to some of the additions that are for every single DCI, but in general, those are the changes that we'd make for all of Chapter 11, but in general, what we're trying to do is to actually write the hard rock mining section.
So the intent isn't trying to make them any more strict?
The intent for sand and gravel, the sand and gravel section, which base course would be defined under sand and gravel, was not to make them any more restrictive. Most of the changes there, as Penny said, were taking pieces from the sand and gravel section and moving them forward to apply to all DCIs, so they wouldn't have to be restated. So the sand and gravel section was changed, I suppose, in some ways, but not substantively in a way that I believe would cause any changes to the market for sand and gravel products.
Okay. Okay, Frank has another question.
I guess my question is, there's a procedure that I would have to go through today to do sand and gravel mining or whatever. Is that procedure going to be more difficult? Is it going to cost me more money? Is it going to take me more time if I do it after this is passed?
Commissioner Katz, I don't believe so. As Penny and Jacob have said, the intent in revising the general DCI requirements was to clean up the organization and clarify language, not to increase the stringency of any of the applicable requirements.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Shepherd?
I did want to add a compliment. I read through all 13 pages of the comments matrix, and, you know, some of them are, you always get those. But for the most part, they were extremely articulate, and I felt that they made the section better by having those public comments. So I appreciate you doing that. I appreciate you listening to the people who were there.
Thank you, Commission Member.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd. Okay, being that said, I have my comments. I have like 14, 15 comments, and I'm going to read them out, and I guess what would happen is the commissioners, when they get it, they would either accept them or not. Correct?
Could you clarify, Mr. Chair? You're suggesting that you're going to make suggestions for modifications to...
I did my review of the ordinance, the proposed ordinance, and I have comments myself, and I just want to make sure they're on record for the board to look at them as well, to see if they want to add them in or not.
Yes, if Mr. Chair, if you're going to ask the commission to consider modifications to the department's proposal, I think you would need to do it in the form of a motion at some point, that you're proposing to make specific changes to the proposal prior to it being approved. So if you want to review them, we might even be able to respond and to clarify, and then perhaps you can craft them into specific edits that can be part of your motion or part of a motion to approve or disapprove.
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and read them, and then we can discuss them if we need to.
And Mr. Shepherd, if you could, or excuse me, Mr. Chair, Mr. Gonzalez, if you could please provide us with a copy of your comments afterwards, that would be really beneficial.
You bet.
Thank you.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to start off with something as far as, I don't know if you know, but I used to work for Santa Fe County. I used to regulate the sand and gravel operations. So I know this stuff pretty good. And one of the things that used to come to me all the time is that, and maybe we want to consider putting this up front in front of the mining ordinances and stuff. Maybe some kind of explanation stating that Santa Fe County does not have jurisdiction on state and federal lands. I used to get calls all the time about mining going on state and federal lands, and I'd have to go out there and explain to them that we didn't have any jurisdiction. And I'm just thinking about maybe putting something up front, saying like, note, Santa Fe County does not have jurisdiction on state and federal lands, just so when people are working with the code, they know up front.
Mr. Chair, Penny's just informed me that that's statement is in Chapter 1 of the SLDC.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, so now let's go to page 4, section 11.4.3. I have a section, it says 11.4.3, sand and gravel extraction and processing except as specified in section 11.10.2. If you go to 11.10.2, that's regulations for junkyards. Is that a typo, or is that something?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is a typo.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, could you repeat that citation for where you found that?
Section 11.4.3. Okay, let me read it again. Page 4, section 11.4.3 references section 11.10.2, which is regulations for junkyards.
The citation should be 10.19, which regulates small-scale sand and gravel.
11.10.19.
Thank you. Okay. Page 5, section 11.5.6.7, number 5. Financial guarantee shall be revised. Okay, I think it has there, you want to renew, let me get to the page. It says, the financial guarantee shall be revised at least every 5 years to reflect the revised estimate of the cost of reclamation. I'd like to put in there, financial guarantees shall be revised at least every 3 to 5 years. And the reason is that because it'd make more sense to give staff more flexibility if they need to get a more current financial guarantee. Okay, same page, section 11.5.9, inspection. After the word permittee, I'd like to insert where it would read, I'd like to insert after permittee, insert have access to the site in order to. So then it would read, representatives of the county may at any time and at the expense of the permittee have access to the site in order to conduct inspections and/or review of monitoring data to ensure compliance with the DCI conditional use permit and standards of this chapter, so forth. Chapter and the SLDC. Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Sure.
I agree that it's important to ensure that we have access, and I believe that we do and will as a condition of the permit itself. But I would suggest that the language would have the unintended effect of changing the meaning of the section. Currently, the purpose of that clause is to ensure that the permittee bears the expense of our conducting inspections. But if we were to insert the words, at the expense of the applicant, have access to the site in order to conduct, it would seem to mean that the permittee needs to pay for our access to the site, not for our conduct of the inspections and review.
You know what? I agree with you. I would just keep that in mind because I know when I was working with the county that we used to have problems getting access to the sites. So I kind of like, that was in my mind as well. So I don't have any problem with that one.
Mr. Chair, that's an excellent point, and I think that land use understands the importance of including conditions in a permit that ensures they have access to a site in order to carry out their obligations under the regulations.
Thank you. Okay, pages 5 and 6, section 11.5.10, expiration date. Let's see. I was thinking here to add to the end of the paragraph a sentence. It is the responsibility of the applicant or permittee to renew the expired permit if necessary.
Mr. Chair, can you repeat that one more time, please?
Sure. At the end of the paragraph, add, it is the responsibility of the applicant or permittee to renew the expired permit if necessary.
Thank you.
Okay. Page 6, section 11.5.12.1, suspension, modification, or revocation of DCI conditional use permit. Add a number, let's see, here I have, add a number 6 which states new or recent code violations.
Thank you.
Okay. Number 7. Pages 7 and 8, section 11.6.1.4. Okay, let's see. A DCI overlay plan and report. I would like to add a number 13, which states a natural features map indicating locations of natural rock outcroppings, natural slopes of 30% and greater, floodways, floodplains, wetlands, historic, cultural, archaeological sites, artifacts, wildlife, vegetation habitats, habitat corridors, and other natural resources.
Thank you.
Did you get that?
Yeah, well, hopefully we can get that on
afterwards.
We can get that on your copy, but thank you for the comment.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Before we move on, can we review that proposal? I'm
Sure.
looking at number 7 on the list. It seems that there may be some overlap between what you proposed and what may be already there.
Yes, there is, and I kind of pulled that out of number 7 because it was kind of, I thought they were both crammed together. I think number 7 could still sit, maybe take out this stuff that I put in this one on 13, but I mean, it's open for discussion. I just thought this was missing rock outcroppings and 30% slopes or greater, which are no build areas. So I wanted them to be like in a separate map. And I know at one time, I'm not sure if it was at the city or the county, we used to call it a natural features map for natural features. That's what I was looking at.
Okay.
Okay, page 14, section 11.7.1.9. Let's see here. Additional plans, reports, and assessments. Okay, on this one, I'd like to add a number 9, which states, provide a temporary and permanent stormwater pollutant prevention plan, which is also known as a SWIP. The BMPs required in this plan will help prevent fugitive dust, soil erosion, and sedimentation. This plan may need to be inserted into the terrain management plan instead. I'm not sure if it goes in this section or in the terrain management. Usually for a SWIP, required for a SWIP, you need to have an acre or more for a SWIP, but I'm talking about a temporary or permanent SWIP, which doesn't have to be regulated by the feds, it's by the county. The city does that. Okay. Page 14, section 11.7.1.9.3C, revegetation. I'd like to add a paragraph, let's see, I want to add last paragraph, add to the last paragraph. The plan should indicate the method of reseeding.
Mr. Chair, can you repeat the citation one more
Sure.
time?
Page 14, section 11.7.1.9.3C, revegetation. Add to a statement to the last paragraph, the plan should indicate the method of reseeding.
Thank you.
And I don't know, there's three types that I'm aware of: hydro seeding, broadcast seeding, and drill seeding. Drill seeding is more successful. Okay, the next one is page 16, and I have that one, page 16, section 11.8.1.1, under general, and actually I have under general, I have kind of two general. It says, to view from all public roads, rivers, parks, and adjoining residential areas shall be screened. And I'm just thinking that, how would this be screened, with trees or walls? How much of the structure needs to be screened? And I just think it creates a lot more questions. I think maybe we need to kind of work on that one a little bit more.
Thank you.
Let's see, page 17, section 11.8.3, water resources. I think we need to either add two new sections, two new 11.8.3.12 and 13, or incorporate into the existing sections 11.8.3.1 through sections 11.8.3.11. And I think we need to add in there location of existing septic tanks and leach fields, and another section for flooding, because that all affects water. Okay. On page 18, section 11.8.5.5. This one, it reads, cut slopes shall be graded to a slope no steeper than 2:1, and fill slopes shall be graded to a slope no steeper than 3:1, unless a properly designed retaining wall is used. I think we need to go to the original requirement of any retaining walls more than 3 feet needs to be stamped by an engineer. So this should be designed by an engineer, or certified and designed by an engineer. Okay. And then page 19, section 11.8.11.3. And I guess, Penny, I could kind of ask you this question here, is that this has to do with the annual monitoring report. I'm just curious on how we're going to track that.
Mr. Chair, if we do have an application come in, then we're going to need to track that through staff as far as when they start and when their annual report is due. Just as we track like a financial guarantee of giving an applicant a 30 or 60-day notice that your reporting is due, and then moving forward and tracking that.
Okay, so you have that covered.
I hope so.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's see, I have two more left here, maybe three more. Pages 25 and 26. Pages 25 and 26, section 11.14.4.6.4, A through M, project description. I'd like to add I think it ends with letter M. I'd like to add a new letter N for staging areas. Okay, and then page 33. Page 33, section 11.14.6.6. That's terrain management. I noted this because maybe this is where we need to add that what I was talking about earlier about the SWIP requirement. So I'm thinking of either one of those sections or maybe even both if we needed to.
Yes, so, Mr. Chair, Penny just pointed out to me correctly that the SWIP, if we were to put it in the area where you first recommended it, it would be applicable to all DCIs. And if we were to put it here in 111466, it would only be applicable to mineral resource extraction.
I think it should be under all DCIs. Okay, and then let's see here. And I'd just like to make a comment also on the requirement. That's all my comments as far as. Oh, I have one more. Since I've been around, there's a lot of ordinances and stuff that have been passed and so forth, and I just want to make sure that staff has the tools to do all this stuff. So I want to make sure that in the budget that we have tools for staff to maybe have smart levels, string lines, whatever they need to do their job in the field, tapes, shovels, whatever. So I don't know how that can get across to the commission, but I'd like to see something there for, you need to have your tools to do your job. And then I would just like to make a statement about that requirement for the 1,000-year storm event. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that if we're going to start complying on some of these things for a 100-year storm event, we're going to be looking at much larger and much deeper ponds. And I'll leave it at that. That's all I have. This is a public hearing. Does anybody else out there have any comments or questions? Please step up.
Chairman, committee, my name's Oscar Huber. I'm just wondering why.
You need to swear in here.
Huber, H-U-B-E-R. In regards to the gob piles, tailings, whatever you'd like to call them in Madrid, that's what I'm here to talk specifically about. I don't understand why we don't have something in reclamation. Because, quite frankly, it's not a sand and gravel operation. If somebody wants to remove them from their property, isn't that reclamation? And I'll put it out to you.
It's a good question.
Tell me. Because I've asked staff a number of times and don't really get an answer. So that's all I had to say.
Yeah, so you're curious of removing the tailings, the coal tailings, if that would be called reclamation, or?
That's what I would think it would be. It's not a sand and gravel. It's not a mining operation. It's moving it.
I guess it also would depend on where you're taking it to. If you're going to take it somewhere else, or keep it in Santa Fe County, I don't know. That's a good question. I can't answer
that. I
that.
think needs to be answered.
Yeah.
And
okay.
In fact, for that, if you're going to use it for roads in the town of Madrid or anywhere else for courseways, would we have to be a sand and gravel operation if you're just removing it?
I think at one time we tried using it for roads, and I don't think it had a good adhesion to it.
You did use it a number of times when.
Yeah, I don't remember what happened, but I remember at one time I don't know if it was experimental or how that would happen, but I remember at one time we did use it.
Okay.
But
that's my question.
What else? Okay, well, thank you very much. Any other?
I do. My name is Roger Taylor. I'm a resident of Galisteo, New Mexico. I'm the president of the Galisteo Community Association and the vice president of the Turquoise Trail Regional Alliance. So my comments here really focus on the National Scenic Byway, which is the Turquoise Trail. We were part of the stakeholder group, our organization, as well as legal representation for the Estrin Ranch up in the Ortiz Mountains, and Pete Dronkers from Earthworks, who was also a mining expert. So a lot of those comments came from our group. We want to commend the county and especially the planning group for the time and the process, the listening and the incorporation of a lot of our additions. And we certainly appreciated the expense and the time duration of having the Montana experts, the consulting group, and part of this. If we think about, and I heard a couple of comments that I was going to address, so I appreciated that from some of the commissioners here. I understand that this is a tightening, if you will, and so some of it could look a little extra costly, a little bit more prohibitive. If you think about the mining that has occurred in the Turquoise Trail area in the past, where it was less populated, less touristry, different businesses, which were predominantly around Cerrillos and Madrid and Golden. Those were pretty extractive and intensive. They've left, everyone talks about the scar that you can see on the mountains in the summertime in particular, and the light is right. We now have a very, very thriving tourist industry on the Turquoise Trail. Madrid certainly brings in a huge revenue, and Cerrillos is revitalizing, and the Turquoise Trail is a major attraction for the county and the city. So we want to be careful about any hard rock mining that might come back. You might say most of that's played out. However, there is still a large area where the old gold mine was processed that is now owned. I think it's on its third iteration of a major foreign conglomerate. It's now a Canadian-Australian company. They haven't mined, although they've looked into it, because it is not currently cost-effective with the cost of gold on the market. That doesn't mean they wouldn't come back. You have to think about, and I appreciated that you brought this up, Mr. Chairman, and Commissioner Katz, the ramifications to the existing populations and businesses, and the image also of our community, et cetera, and where we focus our industries, tourism and service, and what those ramifications might be if some of that large-scale mining came back. I think that the strengthening and some of the additional regulations that have been put in are necessary, and our group certainly supported that. If you think about what's going on with the King Gold Mine today and the devastation and cost that has, you think about the tens of thousands of open pit mines and regular mines that are not addressed or that can't be addressed because of lack of funding. They have major ramifications, not for just now, but the future and for future generations. So this is an important ordinance. I really commend the county for the time and the participation and the writing that's been put into this. And we would really encourage that this be given a pass to go on to a favorable pass to go on to the county commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak? Please come forward.
Matthew Lane. Matthew Lane, L-A-N-E.
Mr. Lane, you swear or affirm the testimony you give
I do.
your address?
2329 Santa Barbara, Santa Fe 87505. In the past, I've been a consultant, and so I've reviewed a lot of applications or prepared a lot of applications for types of operations that would be covered under this ordinance. And so as I was reading through it, if a company were to come in, they would be looking at how much is this going to cost me to prepare an application. I think that the ordinance is really protective of the environment. It's really comprehensive and includes a lot of different aspects, not just the environment, but social justice and things like that. Infrastructure. So if a company came in and wanted to be a good neighbor and comply with all of the things that are in this, I think you could get most of the way by looking at all of the application. But there's some parts in here that you'd run into and you wouldn't know how much cost it would be in order to undertake one of these projects, because I don't think the regulations are very clear. For one, it asks for the applicant to pay for any consultants or anything like that that would be required on the county's behalf to review that application. So in other state applications, maybe the applicant would be asked to pay for the application, but it would be based on like a point system or something like that. There would be some sort of scale where the applicant would have some idea of how much money they would have to put up front in order to pay for the regulatory body to review that application. And here, it's very vague, and it doesn't really say exactly how much that person would have to put up. You know, where would those consultants come from? Is there a cap on it? I mean, you could run up $1 million to $5 million in consultants reviewing an application that would far exceed what the applicant's paying just to prepare the application. So some sort of clarification in there about how much that the county or how much would actually be required, and maybe that's already in there.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, if I could address that, we have a separate fee ordinance, and what that says right now is that there's a $10,000 cap per review. If we were to amend that and increase that, we would have to go through public hearing to do that.
Okay, so everything that would be the maximum would be $10,000 for review of the application and review of the annual reports?
Let me just clarify that. That would be $10,000, I believe, per review that we did. So if we had a separate review of the financial report and a separate review, say, of the water report, they could each be $10,000, but it wouldn't be like in the millions. And if we were to increase that per report, we would have to come through public hearing to do that.
Maybe you can answer this too earlier right there. Is there regulatory review timeframes of how long the county would have to review an application before it was approved or denied?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, there are standard procedures in the Land Development Code that talk about how long we've got to state that an application is complete, and then to go to reviewing agencies. There's then land use facilitation that can happen, and there's some timeframes related to that. And there's probably additional timeframe if we need to go out for a review. But in general, the reviewing agencies get between 30 and 60 days to review.
Thank you. I guess that would need to be clarified, because if each one's a different report, how many different reports could actually be reviewed at $10,000 apiece? The second question I had, and maybe we could just clarify this, which is under 11.8.11.2, which has to deal with the annual reports, and it says I'm reading, after reviewing the report, the administrator shall recommend and the board shall determine after a hearing whether the DCI conditional use permit should be suspended, revoked, or modified. It seems like maybe that would be up for debate after some violations have occurred or something. I mean, that would seem like if I had a client, that would bring a lot of uncertainty of every year your permit was under review of whether it could be approved or not. So maybe there was an intent there and I'm misreading that. That could be clarified.
I think that also has to do with the applicant when they're doing their work. If they're like, for example, I know at one time we had a sand and gravel operation that was going on, and the whole time it was a permitted one, and then when we looked into it, they had actually jumped out of their acreage, and they weren't. They were only supposed. I think they were only supposed to have their staging area in a certain area, and then they jumped out of their acreage, and so then we had to come before the Board of County Commissioners to suspend their permit, and so when issues like that come out, am I correct, Vicki? I mean, if after the review of the annual report there was a violation of then they could be suspended or amended. But as it reads right now, it just seems like it's going before a hearing every year. Yeah, it's more for the annual report.
And so, I mean, I think that, and I appreciate a lot of the clarifications. I just think if someone was coming in as an applicant, they'd want a little bit of clarity here as far as what it would be. And some of the financial clarifications at $10,000, that's a huge, I was unaware of that, so I appreciate that. And then there's time frames for approval. And then that last one about annual reports and the annual review of that report. And you know, what would be in order for revoking a permit or asking for a new permit? What would trigger that? For those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay. Penny, I have a question. When was the last, do we have any, what's the most recent sand and gravel operation that was permitted? Do we have anything recent?
Mr. Chair, that would actually be a question for probably Vicky or Paul. I think early 2000s?
Early 2000s?
Yeah.
Okay, I was just curious. Okay.
Early, like between 2005, 2010, I believe.
So you haven't done a lot since I left? I mean, as far as, as far as...
No, we had one large application that was, I don't know if it was actually denied or withdrawn.
But you haven't had any Hard Rock ones?
No, we
for a while.
haven't had Hard Rock, no.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Okay. This was a public hearing already. Do I need to close a public hearing for something like this? Okay, then I'm going to close the public hearing. I'm sorry, do we still have another speaker? Yes. Okay, I'll retract closing the public hearing. Come forward.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, if I could just clarify that last point on 11.8.11.2. I think that the intent of that was that the annual report would only go to the board if there was an issue. So we will work with legal to clarify that and make sure that that is correct.
Okay, so I think I was off on that one too. Okay, thank you. Okay, please come forward.
It's Catherine Fishman, and I'm at 6405 St. Anne's in Albuquerque, 87111. I'm Catherine Fishman, and I'm the owner of the Waldo Hard Rock Quarry in, it's a sand and gravel quarry in Santa Fe County. And I did attend a couple of hearings regarding the mineral resource extraction and processing regulations, just to make sure that the sand and gravel was not included in some of those regulations. But I still have concerns about the fact that sand and gravel that is being produced for construction would be subject to these DCI uses. And I understand from today that they're already subject to these DCIs. But as an operator of an existing material supplier, I know for a fact that if I had to go and apply for these DCI zoning overlays and conditional permits, I wouldn't do it. There's not enough margin or profit in sand and gravel being used for construction materials to warrant the costs that are associated with these DCIs. And given all the different studies and experts and different reviews that have to go on in order to just permit a sand and gravel mine. And I think there's a big oversight here on how that impacts the county in terms of sand and gravel that is used for construction. I understand that these regulations probably sound good in terms of hard rock mining like gold and silver and other things that have large margins, that have a huge profit margin. We got to keep sand and gravel at a price that the county can afford, that New Mexico Department of Transportation can afford, so we can build roads, that we can provide the base course that you want. Any kind of change in the manner of what we're producing out there would be subject to a DCI ordinance here. And if we were to bring in, say, a recycle crusher to recycle materials, and we exceed 20,000 tons over the lifetime that we are producing, I mean, there doesn't seem to be a qualification on the 20,000 tons of material. We're subject to these rules and regulations just for bringing in a new crusher, a new manner of crushing materials. And having to go through this process in order to do that just makes it completely cost prohibitive. You're not going to be able to attract anybody to come into Santa Fe County and produce these materials. So you're going to be looking to Rio Arriba County or to Sandoval County to buy your construction materials. So what does that do to the price of concrete? You're going to be hauling in concrete sand from Rio Arriba County or Sandoval County or Bernalillo County, and that is automatically going to double the price of concrete. So what does that do to the price of affordable housing here in Santa Fe County? I mean, that's a big deal right now, and you are, with these regulations, the way they read right now, in terms of sand and gravel that's being processed for construction materials, it makes it cost prohibitive to do that. And you're going to really see an impact, I think, on whether anybody else besides me, who's already grandfathered in, is going to be able to come in and produce these materials. I had been in negotiations for a while to expand my pit, but now with these new rules and regulations, I'm not sure I can afford to do that. I actually have started the process of looking in other counties to find other locations to mine, so I'm not mining in Santa Fe County. And unfortunately, it's just going to raise the costs for everybody. And I just think it's a little short-sighted to include large-scale sand and gravel and have all these restrictions placed upon them as well. We are conscious. We are environmentally conscious. We try to do things right. We try to mine in the right way. Have we made mistakes in the past? Sure, everybody makes mistakes. It's hard to do a mining operation the way we do it and not make a mistake go outside of a boundary here or there. But we are trying to correct all those errors and work with the county closely in terms of making our mining operation something that the county and us can be proud of. I understand there's other mining operations out there that aren't that conscious, that leave scars that are ugly and unattractive. We don't want to be that mining company. But, you know, I just think that we need to kind of pull ourselves back a little bit and think about how those costs and these regulations are going to impact something that doesn't make a lot of money, something that is used in construction, that is used for the basic materials to build our houses, to build our roads, and whether or not that's going to be feasible in the future. One of the other things I wanted to just point out is I was actually kind of surprised that mining experts were brought in to draft these things. One of the things that just kept sticking out to me was that there's professional engineers required for just about every single plan that's here. And a lot of the requirements in these things that, in these regulations, I'm sorry, are not even done by professional engineers. They're done by other types of professionals, but not professional engineers. So if I was to go and submit an application and get these studies done, I would have to hire a professional engineer, and then the professional engineer would have to go hire somebody like Matt to do the work, and then the engineer, I guess, would sign the study and submit it. But it was clear to me that they didn't understand that professional engineers don't necessarily do the work that they're asking the professional engineers to sign off on. Professional engineers do not generally have expertise in greenhouse gas emissions. Professional engineers don't usually have expertise in hazardous materials and how they're handled. They usually aren't taking surface water, groundwater, soil samples, geochemistry, vegetation, terrain. That's not what engineers do. So maybe they were thinking of something else, but an engineer is not the appropriate professional to be hiring to do this type of work. So that's all I had to say.
I have a question for you. Were you involved in any of the meetings with Mr. Stock?
Well, like I said, I went to the, actually 2 or 3 years ago when this started, I went to the first hearing, and they said, well, you guys aren't going to be impacted by the hard rock minerals. Your sand and gravel, you're not impacted by any of this. And then I sent Matt and another representative to the latest round of studies on these regulations. And again, it was made clear to us that it wasn't going to impact sand and gravel operations. But as I understand it from listening to Ms. Ellis Green and the attorneys here today, the DCIs have always impacted sand and gravel operations. It's just being made more clear today that they're bringing them forward, and sand and gravel is going to be subject to these things as we move forward. I was never subject to these before with the applications that we filed for Waldo Quarry. But now that we are, it really makes you think twice about whether or not you can afford to do it.
Okay, thank you. I would just like to say I did look at, when I was looking at that application, I did see all these professional this, professional this, professional this, and this. That's when I was looking at, okay, they have professional for this, but they didn't put an engineer for the retaining wall. And so I was looking at all that stuff together, but that would be something for the board to look at. I mean, there's certain types of engineers, but I do kind of agree some of those requirements. I was kind of wondering, well, what kind of professional would you get for this? So I did kind of have those questions to myself as well. Thank you. Okay, so I'm closing the public hearing. And what do we need to do? Do we have to do a motion on this typically?
That's right, Mr. Chair. If I could take this opportunity to address how your comments should be considered in the context of the
Sure.
motion. If the commission is inclined to adopt a motion.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
could you use your mic, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
If the commission is inclined to adopt a motion approving the proposed ordinance, I would recommend adding a statement directing the Land Use Department to incorporate your comments into the draft that we provide to the Board of County Commissioners. And that will allow us to go back to the transcript and pull from it the essence of your proposals and incorporate them into the appropriate places.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Katz?
Will the draft that the county commission sees be different from this draft? Will there be some of these corrections and changes incorporated into that draft?
That would be the objective, Commissioner Katz. We present a version showing the changes in response to the commission's modifications in track change format.
Thank you.
So that y'all could see them as well, and if there was an issue, it could be addressed.
Okay, do we have any further discussion or any motions from the commission? Okay, in that case, I'll make anybody want to? I'll make a motion. Make a motion. Make a motion for approving for adoption of the.
I believe it would be
Recommending.
would it be a motion to recommend?
A motion to recommend adoption of the amendments to, for ordinance 2016-9, incorporating my comments, and I guess that'd be it. Okay. Do I have a second? Second. Okay. All in.
Friendly amendment to that?
Sure.
Your comments and the other comments that were made.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Okay, my comments and the other comments as well.
I apologize, Commissioner Cass. Can we get a better definition of which comments you're referring to? Otherwise, we're going to be parsing the transcript and trying to determine which are comments and which are comments that need to be incorporated and which ones are statements of commissioners' interests.
Well, my understanding is that the chair made a number of comments, and there were a lot, oh boy, we overlooked that, or oh, that was an error, and some that I wasn't, clear. I just was assuming that staff will look at the comments that were made, and and bring out the cogent ones. I mean, there were some comments that members of the public made that, you know, might be worthy of bringing to the attention of the Board of County Commissioners.
Commissioner Katz, I'm afraid I'm still a little unclear. There were a number of comments made, some of which were clearer than others, and the only ones that where we had specific proposals to change language in specific sections were the ones that the chair raised, to my recollection. I'd be concerned that we would that we're being asked to parse the transcript to find to evaluate comments made by other persons and somehow bring them forward, even if we don't agree with them, which may well be the case. The comments that the chair made, we listened to, and when we believed it was problematic, we advised the chair and I believe reached an accommodation as to what the comment would generally address. But as for other comments that were made by members of the commission, with all due respect, and by members of the public, those comments weren't nearly as clear, and we did not respond on a issue-by-issue basis to clarify whether we agreed or disagreed with that comment. And so I can see a path forward for how to deal with the chair's comments, but not with anything else that any other commissioner or member of the public might have said during this proceeding.
Mr. Chair, Commission members, I would add to that there was a question about 11.8.11.2 of annual reports, whether they all go to the board, and I did state that we would look at that and clarify that. And additionally, the last speaker talked about which kind of professional engineer created reports, and maybe staff can review that and see whether or not those are the relevant engineers to review those. Other than that, we did get the chair's comments, and I believe there was one that was on page 5, 11.5.9 about the inspection, that upon discussion, the chair pulled that one back. But the other ones were comments that we could incorporate.
That's correct.
Thank you. I guess my reaction was that if I were a member of the public and had made a comment, I would want that to be considered by staff, and I see Penny is telling me that is true, so I'm relieved by that, and I hope the public is relieved by that. And that they should have some way of knowing, gee, I had an issue, I made a comment, and staff reviewed it fine, and accepted it fine, or I made a comment and they ignored it, or they didn't find it worthy, and maybe I better hustle myself to the county meeting. I just think that a little respect is due to the members of the public.
Of course. Perhaps, Commissioner Katz, with the further clarification of Penny and what you just said, we can append to the current spreadsheet of public comments that Jacob's been maintaining, the comments that have been offered here. And if we don't propose a change to the board, then we will address the comment in that spreadsheet.
That'd be very helpful. Thank you very much. That's a great way.
Commissioner?
Oh, yes, Mr. Shepherd.
Penny, last year, Commissioner Anaya requested that planning group look at reclamation and come up with a determination around reclamation. Did anything happen from that request from last year?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, we have been working on the Hard Rock section, so no, we have not looked at that. The one issue about the reclamation is that the question is it reclamation from an approved mine, or is it an old historic mine, which is the situation in a lot of Madrid, and mining of that is for the intention of using that material for sand and gravel. We've met, staff has met, Vicky's staff has met numerous times with Mr. Huber regarding that, and we do have a small-scale sand and gravel section of the code that he can utilize that's not a DCI. If it goes over that, amount or the acreage, then it is a DCI. Those areas are going to have the same impact of taking the sand and gravel along small roads that a brand new sand and gravel operation would have. And staff has reviewed the reclamation there, and it's not from an approved mine that we have. It's a historical mine that has now revegetated, looks like part of the landscape, and would have a similar impact as whether it was that pile or this pile. And so the situation there is that there are requirements for DCI. Actually, for several years we have been meeting to discuss what the requirements were and how Mr. Huber could make a submittal. It would certainly be a reason to give as far as why mining in that area, but it wouldn't necessarily circumvent the DCI section. So staff has looked at that, and we don't have a proposal for a separate reclamation section.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Penny. Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second? Second. Okay, we have a second. All in favor, say aye. 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 All opposed? Okay, carries. Okay. Next item, D, petitions from the floor. Thank you, Mr. Stockton. Mr. Stock, I mean. Petitions from the floor. Any petitions from the floor? No. Okay. Communications from the commission members? Anything? No. Okay. Communication from the attorney?
Nothing, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Matters from the land use staff?
Mr. Chair, this month I do have an update for the Planning Commission on cases that went to the BCC for action with the Planning Commission's recommendation, so I'll hand that out to you before you leave today.
Okay, thank you. Paul, you have anything? All right. Next Planning Commission regular meeting, April 18th, 2019. And do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.